Good morning, Exercise Science. Chapter 11 intro today. It is Monday, April 6th. You may not see this video until tomorrow. Just depends how long it takes my computer to upload it. But you should be able to answer the questions or the one question that I asked you using your notes. This pretty much addresses that question and it sets the stage for the rest of the chapter. Probably do a couple more lectures this chapter, just short ones, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes or so, just to kind of hit on some major points and explain what my expectations are. You guys did a great job with the last chapter, finishing up, answering the questions. That test that I made, it was a high-level set of questions, and I realize obviously you have the chance to use resources that might not be available to you when you were taking a regular paper and pencil test with me. But at the same time, your answers were good, they were unique, they were creative, solutions were varied, and that's exactly what I want. So when I ask you specific questions about patient care, how you would deal with a certain situation, that's exactly what I want you to think. I don't care if your answer isn't exactly right. I'll steer you in the right direction, I'll put some comments in there for you. I want to see the thinking going on as you answer these kind of questions and not just regurgitating material that you know or you can find in my notes or online. I want you to think about, how would you handle these situations. So I'm going to do more of the same, but before we do those type of questions, we have to kind of address the material first. So once I get that in place and give you all the notes and the questions that are going to lead up to those final, either a project or another assessment like we did before, we have to hit the anatomy and physiology of the blood. All right, blood's important stuff, obviously. Without it, you're in pretty bad shape. That's probably the most simple thing I'll say for the remainder of this chapter. But when we look at the blood, you have to ask yourself a question: what's it for? Why do we have a bloodstream? What's the whole functionality of the cardiovascular system and the blood specifically? We'll do cardiovascular system next chapter. That's what carries the blood. But what's the blood do? In essence, basically, blood is a liquid tissue. It's actually a connective tissue because it connects the entire body. So when we look at it, it's a liquid tissue composed of plasma and formed elements. Formed elements are a collective name for the white blood cells, the red blood cells, and the platelets, which we'll discuss in a little more detail over the next few days. So that's the beginning of the definition. This is basically just the definition of what is blood. So when we look at blood, you can fit the first kind of grouping into what we would call transport. Blood is for transportation. It moves things around the body from point A to point B. And along the way, it either picks things up or it drops things off. What does it drop off? It drops nutrients. Nutrients like oxygen or glucose or amino acids, things that the cells need to do their jobs, right? In the meantime, when the cells are picking up nutrients, they're also dropping off waste products. Cells are like little individual houses, so to speak. When you have a house, you're going to bring in raw materials and you're going to have trash at the end of the week that you're going to have to get rid of. The cells just can't accumulate this trash. They do their best job to recycle some of it, to break it down and build in other things, but some things you just can't recycle, you can't break down within the machinery of the cells. So the body has to get rid of it. That's called excretion. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the year as well. All right, so we're removing wastes. It also delivers hormones. We talked about that the entire chapter, last chapter. In order to get a hormone from point A to point B, you have to release it into the bloodstream, and then it'll make it to its target tissue. How does it make it to that target tissue? There are specific receptors on the surface of these cells that allow them to recognize those hormones, and then obviously, as we talked about, peptide and steroid hormones, once they reach the cell membrane, they're going to cause some type of reaction to occur, either based on what's happening on the outside of the cell or inside of the cell. They're a highway for white blood cells. The lymphatic system, which we have not talked about yet either, also is a highway for white blood cells, but you have to get your white blood cells to the site of infection. You talk about inflammation. You talk about other different ways that the body responds to infection, but we have to get the white blood cells there, so the bloodstream carries white blood cells around the body. So these are your transport things, and then we can talk about water balance. The bloodstream is a tremendous reservoir for excess water, for needed water in our body. It allows us to keep our water levels where the body homeostatically wants to keep them, right? So where do we store that water? We don't have a hump like a camel. We don't have a water reservoir. We don't even have basically water reservoirs within our cells like some other organisms like plants do. So we store a lot of water in our bloodstream. So it's a good place to maintain our water balance. And then the last aspect, fluids have the capability, much more so than air, liquid. We talk about your phases of matter, but liquids have a tremendous capacity to hold heat. So when your body's trying to maintain its temperature, the best way to do that is to use the fluid capacity of our body, and our body's 50-60% water. So water tends to lose heat and gain heat a lot slower than air, so it's a good way to keep yourself warm. It's a good way to maintain body temperature, and the bloodstream is kind of like a radiator for us. So basically when you're hot, this involves more than just the blood, but when you're hot, your capillaries on the surface of your skin will dilate. That's why we flush when we're hot, and that what the body's doing is releasing heat to the external environment. So that's a way to cool. Consequently, on the other hand, if you're cold, your capillaries will constrict, they'll squeeze, and that'll force more of that blood towards the core of your body, keep it from losing its heat, and it keeps your body temperature warmer when you're getting cold. So that's a good start for this chapter. Just kind of thinking about what the blood does, and again, we'll get into some more specifics as they relate to exercise science as the chapter goes on. Probably do one more lecture this week, and then we'll go into next week. As far as the schedule goes, I posted that as well this morning. We're not going to have any assessments this week. I might do some long-term work towards the end of the week for next week, but probably look to do one of those short question tests or assessments at the end of the next week at some point. Have a good day.